Hello, Mikey.
Hello. Good chaotic
Good
morning.
morning for you. Good night for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Where are you right now?
I am in my studio in Auckland, New Zealand. The dog and I just walked into the office. So, yeah, I'm here in Auckland, New Zealand. I'm originally from the States, from Minnesota, but I moved here from New York about, 10, 11 years ago.
Oh, wow. So when
Yeah.
did you move back to Auckland?
I think it was January of 2021. Or sorry, 2000. No, confused. 2009, actually, January 2009. So it's been a bit longer than that. Yeah.
But I
My
can guess that you
husband,
are
my
coming
husband
from.
was from New Zealand, so we moved from Manhattan to New Zealand. So it was a bit of a culture shock when I got here. I was walking
Really?
too fast and being too New York for New Zealand, but I've settled down now.
But are you coming often back to US for work,
Yeah, I've
maybe?
actually been back 3 times already this year, which has been amazing, and I'm really hoping that I can keep that up because we did feel a bit trapped here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So it's great finally getting to meet people and get back to work in the US as well, which I'm really excited about.
No, it's really nice. We're gonna talk about it a bit later because I saw some exhibitions that you're gonna explain us.
Yes.
Uh, So first of all, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's a real pleasure and honor to do an interview with you on behalf of Jenny Dao.
Thank you.
So my first question gonna be simply, who are you and what is your work? What are you doing exactly? Yeah, obviously, of course.
Yeah, it's a not a small question. So I have been a photographer all my life, and but I have been working on the series that Jenny Dow has collected. Thank you very much. It was such an amazing surprise to see that happen. Yeah, so I've been working on this series for coming on 20 years next year, and it's a big anniversary for me. So I work primarily in libraries with books and archives,
Mhm.
and have been doing that for so long that the landscape of them has really changed over that period of time. So when I started 20 years ago, these books, these particular kind of books that I photograph, so Curator is an example, which is part of your collection now, was photographed in a university library. So often what I photograph are books and journals that have been kind of sitting dusty on the shelves in libraries all over the world. So they're not particularly the prettiest books. The librarians always want to bring me to the antique collections, but I'm actually really interested in these bound magazines and journals that really sort of have this very utilitarian attraction, and with a combination of color and words, because I don't manipulate or touch the books at all. Um, yeah, with a combination of that, I've focused on that primarily for the last 20 years. But I have done a lot of other works with libraries and archives. I've done projects on Andrew Carnegie, who has built libraries all over the world, and have worked with several other archives. I'm about to go into some law archives and medical archives and psychological archives. So I'm somehow have found myself really living in the stacks for much of my artistic career.
Yeah, I can see that. I've been through your collection and the different volumes that you did, and
Mm.
I definitely see that you have a real appetite for books, but not really the books as a reader might like. The reader gonna like the content of the book. You, the way you see it, tell me if I'm wrong, but you try to capture this this kind of backgrounds that are parts of the library that you go through, like people go through the library and pass those books, but they
Mm.
don't see it on your eyes. They are getting dusty, they are part of the decor. And you say that you are doing this work since with books in 20 years, but I'm sure that even the evolution of how those books are used change over those 20 years, correct?
It's changed dramatically. So even to the point of where part of one project that I did, I actually took these books because they've been thrown in the dumpster in the process of me working on them, and made floors out of them, out of tons of books that you would actually walk over. So, I think when I started the project, I started in Minnesota, where we have a lot of real estate and a lot of space for people to house books, basically, in the Midwest. And for example, I photographed blood, which appeared on a billboard through Obscura. Photographed blood in Minnesota, and the librarians had bound it in red. And then I found it bound in blue in New York. So I went to go photograph it, and found it in one library, and then I found it in a third color at another library. And I thought, oh, I'm going to go photograph that. But in the process of this, which was, I think, probably in about 2010, they had thrown, I walked in and the library was entirely empty by the time I went to photograph it, because it's usually not really, it doesn't take an incredible amount of time to make the photographs, but for me to get permission and access into the library is usually that research and relationship building with the librarians is a huge part of my process. So by the time I get access, sometimes the collection has changed from what I originally scouted. And in this case, I walked up to the librarian and said, where are the books? And she said, oh, some of them have been sent to offsite storage.
Yeah.
And she said, confidentially, they'll be discarded later once people are done being upset about the books being thrown out, but the rest of them were in the dumpster. So I think culturally, I've seen, even within the US, and then also it's very different in Europe and very different in New Zealand, about how people and cultures and librarians deal with and consume books.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very different relationship. I mean, in the US, they kind of come and go as commodities, and they, as soon as they're not relevant, they get rid of them. But it's often in here in New Zealand, because we're so far away from everything. I was kind of shocked to walk into every library and every book has been touched and worn and revered, as opposed to, these volumes like Curator have never been cracked by anyone. So it's really interesting culturally, as a small nation of only 5 million people in the entire country, that information, up until now, of course, is changing by the minute with how we're accessing things digitally. Yeah, it's very interesting to see that shift. And that is actually part of the reason I became interested in NFTs, is because it sort of feels to me, not that I was interested in NFTs in themselves, but it's just the natural evolution of how we consume information. And that's something that I'm conceptually interested in.
Yeah, we can, like, books are really the traditional way to learn information and also to transmit. It's something that a book, you can give it to your daughter and everything, and it keep a bond, a link. So,
Yeah.
and by a sense, NFTs, it's something that is super digital and super volatile. I mean, it's something that you have virtually. So when you think about it, you have the paper, materials that you can hold, that have a value that you can see, and who can be even more expensive for some books during the time. And the NFTs with this new kind of learning information are also transmitted. So it's someone like you, who is an artist, really, let's say on the real world, because there's also a lot of exhibition, and book and library are your major topic. And to see this transition to NFTs, it's really, really interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like I've taken sort of a few months off recently. And when I was putting together the thread on my Twitter account yesterday for this, I was sort of really kind of shocked about how much sort of happened from the time that I entered last year, and how quickly things evolved. But I was also reminded that the reason that I came into the space is because I'm interested in it conceptually. So there's a couple really larger ideas that I have that I suppose, now that I know the NFT world, I'm like, oh, that's a larger, that's more of a collection that I'd like to work with a programmer on. But there's really, I'm quite interested because it hasn't been defined in in NFTs or in the metaverse, I'm really interested in defining what the libraries look like and what libraries look like, and actually bringing some of that nostalgia over, because we all love the nostalgia of books, whether you consume them or not. I mean, I've got a stack mile high at my bedside, but I end up reading most of it on most of my books and any kind of information I consume on my phone. So I am really interested in doing that. And so I'm kind of thinking, you know, what is next could be this sort of massive project that I would need help with. And maybe something like a, you know, I was looking at a residency that my colleague Claudia Pollock from the Foundry Commission had done, something with a residency with people that could help me conceptually sort of figure out how we can make this information sort of visually represented within NFTs in the metaverse. I'm really interested in doing that. So I don't have my head quite around it, but yesterday I thought, oh, I need to get back to that.
No, actually it sounds pretty promising, I have to say, because no one ever did it, and this is what is amazing about metaverse of Web3 generally, is that the openness of, you know, of chance that you can take, and the possibility are limitless so far.
Yeah, and it's really quite exciting. I mean, as a traditional artist, there definitely, you know, in my practice, there are probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 of us in the traditional art world that work with books in libraries. And you kind of end up showing together and knowing one another's work, and it's sort of like anything else, like NFTs somehow have, you know, this whole flower culture that has developed. In the fine art world, there is sort of a group of artists that work with books and archives. So I think it's really interesting to kind of be, you know, the first person here thinking about that and thinking, how can I bring some of that work that we've all done visually as artists to this side of the screen.
And it's a huge challenge, actually, because someone who's gonna go see your exhibition gonna definitely not see the book, but through your vision you're gonna be able, you know, to see the kind of textures that you wanted to put. You know, there is a kind of direct contact on a real exhibition.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that. I've got a stack of prints behind me because for the Obscura Foundry Commission, it was sold out before we created it. And so for that commission, I worked with several layers of imagery. So started with an image that I took, but then layered it from microfilm and Internet Archive. And it was first shown as an NFT and only as a one-of-one NFT. But of course, I can still print it. And it's been really interesting because this week, you know, I'm like, okay, if I'm doing this the other way around, where you don't create an exhibition and then it lands on the screen, but if you create it on the screen, and I'm showing it at the Aotearoa Art Fair in November, so I'm showing this NFT work in print, what does that look like? And it's a little bit of a mind fuck because it's like, you know, how do we do this? And am I, you know, do I put it on glossy paper? Is it metallic? Or do I work as I usually do? You know, is it displayed on a screen? Is it still in a frame? So I've really had to ask myself all of those questions. And I actually think I'm bringing it back to the paper. But it looks different. It's definitely a different aesthetic.
It's different that your traditional exhibition on the material.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the process that I use for the volume work, which is, sorry, behind me, the process that I use for that work has been very well established. And I did all of this experimenting, you know, until I landed on, okay, this is the size, because scale is really important to the work, which is also another question for me about how to deal with the metaverse. I mean, and that's changed even in the last 12 months. So when I entered in October, I'm like, okay, how do I create, because I'm interested in photographic installations, how do I create installations in the metaverse? And at the time, there were sort of exhibition spaces
Exactly.
within the metaverse, right? So that was really interesting. So people would ask me to be in a show, and I'd say, yes, I want to be in the show, but can we work on not plugging my work into this frame? Because in the real world, there are these huge room-filled installations. So I don't want to be going backward. But it's been really interesting because now we have more physical NFT spaces. So, when you start thinking about digital billboards and warehouses full of screens, that to me, again, is like, okay, wow, that's even in the last year, that's in the last 4 or 5 months that we now have these real life spaces that I would like to start working with to say, how can we create a full installation versus, plugging in some JPEGs and letting them roll through
Evolve.
the screen. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have to find a way to create your own space, as you did in traditional exhibition, for the visitor to have the real experience.
Yeah.
So it's a brand new challenge, and it's super interesting because we have a little guest. No,
Another guest. No, bully down.
it's a boat. No, it's really fascinating because, as you said, this space goes so fast that you don't know which possibility you will have access in only a few months.
Yeah.
But you said something really interesting, and you're not the first one saying that, is the fact that now you're not going to produce and then sell. It's
Right.
first of all, you're going to sell, and then you'll be able to produce.
Which is great.
And it's amazing. It's just a new way of consummation. And even if you transfer it to fashion, for example, even for brands, now you can sell the product, and then when it sells, you only do the fabrication of the products when it sells. So you don't over products. Even for you just realize you have your NFT. It's gonna be your proper collection, only digital, but
Yes.
it's gonna be a luxury, a kind of not extraordinary, but something that's gonna be special to transpose it into real life, as it was before, if we compare it to before. So it's a just brand new way of producing and of doing the exhibition, because at the end of the day, what's gonna have the more value, the digital exhibition or the traditional? And I will tell you, maybe it's gonna be soon. So for you who are a traditional artist working since more than 20 years with exhibition all around the world, it's definitely something that is really changing, and I'm sure you're super excited about it.
I am. And, I think a lot of people are intimidated by it, but I think for me, it's really easy for me to get my head around it because I'm so interested in what it is conceptually and how it's related back to my work. So, we have all the usual. I mean, now I'm thinking, oh, well, there'll never be anything I make again that doesn't have an NFT. If I make a print edition, that I will never make a print edition again. Usually I have a print edition of 5 or 10, and with one AP that sits aside it will be a print edition still of 3, 5, 10, whatever it is, but it will have an AP and an NFT that sits aside it. So that's really, and I think it's a no-brainer for my work, because I think some people are going to be more interested in collecting it as an NFT. Maybe not right now. It feels a little bit early. I mean, one of the first interviews when I launched the Volume project, which is the project that I've been working on for so long online, my friend Carlos. Sorry.
You have 3 volumes, correct? There is volume 1 and 2 and 3. Is that correct?
Well, it's sort of, I've just kind of divided it up that way on my website because it's so long it's so long that you can kind of break it up into stages. But someone said, Mickey, what are you thinking, trying to bring the library to the internet? Like, it's a ridiculous, like, why would you do this? But I do believe that, somebody said, well, why do they care? Why does this audience care? And I think that just because we're all interested in NFTs does not mean we're not interested in books. And like I said, even more so because the people in the space are building something new, it is important to create an archive of that as well at the same time.
No, I couldn't agree more. And there is such different kind of arts, into NFTs. And so I had a look on your collection because you're also a collector.
Yes.
And for example, you mostly support other photographer, so you have your own, scoop of interest into NFTs, and there is a lot of people who are gonna have the same as you, or gonna be sensitive to seeing this kind of nostalgic library in this new Web3, a bit futurist world. So there is a place for everyone. For this, I totally believe. And on my point of view, I really believe in also in photography as NFTs, because it just makes so much sense. As an artist, you have a photography. When it's on the internet, you don't know. You can just do a click, write, and save it. But at the end, you don't know who is the creator, and you just see the picture everywhere. With the blockchain technology and NFT, obviously, you can have a tract, and the artist can have a reward on his creation, which is who has the most sense when we think about.
Well, and I think it's really interesting, having worked in photography so long, to see organizations like Magnum come in, and photographers like Todd Hido, and archives like the August Sander come in, because and when I see that, I think, these are because photography is not that old. The right now there's a Wolfgang Tillmans exhibition that's just opened up at MoMA, and unfortunately I missed it by a few days when I was just in New York. But it's not that long ago that photographic installations were a new thing. I mean, he's only 54 years old with his mid-career retrospective at MoMA. So it's not that long ago that that was new. So photography, maybe in a digital art sort of came after photography, but before that it was photography. So to see photographers entering the space, you're right, it's only natural, because the medium is actually still quite young, and they like to say that New Zealand is like trapped in the 70s. And when I got here, there was still the conversation of, is photography an art form? And I was like, oh my God, what are you saying? it's not everyone is in London or New York, and things are consumed, and thankfully it doesn't all move so quickly, because by cultures moving more slowly or more cautiously, it allows all of us to take some time to consider our history and how it evolved. So yeah.
No, I just agree. No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's just a beautiful way to keep, sharing the information. And if the new media is the Web3, and if it's through NFTs, just to share and to spread information and to spread art and culture from different perspectives, well, let's go for it. It's only sharing even more.
I mean, that was one of the things that I was so excited when I entered the space, because suddenly I wasn't, actually alone on an island. There's plenty of artists and photographers here in New Zealand, but I was able to reconnect with this whole community that I had missed for the last decade. And really, it's kind of, the way the New York art world worked when I left, it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. So when I reconnected with some people here, I just was so excited. And it's been, on a personal level, to be able to work globally is huge, because I really did feel quite isolated and not really part of this culture yet, and not really still part of that culture. And you get sort of, and there's so many of us that still want to travel and move. It's been huge, and I'm attracted to it for that reason too, because of the global reach, not because it's a global marketplace. It's a global reach because you can be in London and I can be in New Zealand, and we're making it work, and that is that's pretty extraordinary, and I'm excited about the potential of that too.
And you did something else that is pretty extraordinary. You mentioned it a bit earlier, but I'm gonna share my screen now.
Okay.
I would like to go with you on the billboard that you realize. So,
Okay.
so you do a photography of something that is real, but it's only on NFTs. I mean, not only on NFTs, but is selling as an NFTs, and then it's going back to a billboard in real life.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Let me share it.
Very exciting. Yeah, this is one of the most exciting things that happened soon after I entered the space. So I've always known about the Billboard Collective in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And the Billboard Collective started working with Obscura, and two of the people that I'm very happy to have been working with. Alejandra Cartagena has been a leader in bringing, of course, we all love our Alejandra.
Amazing. It's
He
great.
has
He's the
he's
one. Is he the one who introduced you to the space or to Obscura DAO? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I wish I would have trusted myself 6 months before, because I was like, I'm really interested in these NFTs conceptually, and I thought, wait, Alejandra's here.
Yeah.
That gave it to me. That was like, okay, there is a place for photography. And he's the one who has taken so many photographers. The strength of the photography community, I think, can really be attributed to him, because he's able to straddle these two worlds that we live between. And it's
Yeah.
not just, it's with artists, it's with photojournalists, it's with archives. His work is so strong, and it's got that credibility that all of us can recognize, okay, there's a space for us here. And his positivity and energy to say anything is possible is why this billboard was possible. It's like, what do you mean we're getting billboards through NFTs? I would have never thought that was this would ever happen.
No, what is really nice is I think he is a really good role model, as a photographer, a
Mm.
traditional photographer, and he believes so much in the space, and he does so much to the space that, he gives a chance to photographer like you who might think that they are not, that it's not going to work. You can do
Mm.
it. We have a whole team. And I just wanted to go back to this point with you. For the people who don't know how Obscura DAO work, because you had a commissionary work with Obscura DAO, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe just explain quickly how it works, because it's also really interesting. And we are working, Jenny DAO, we are working a lot also with Obscura DAO, because
Good.
we love photography. So
Oh, good. I'm sure. Yeah, Cooper as well has been amazing there. So when I came on, Obscura hadn't started yet, and it was fascinating. This is one of those things I wish I would have archived to watch the photography platforms pop up. It seemed like it was happening daily. That Obscura started, and then Fellowship, and Alejandra called me and said, "Hey, I'm starting this platform, and would you be interested in mentoring some of the photographers coming in, so we can bring more people into the community, and help translate what NFTs are?" And I said, of course. So over a very short period of time, they started with 3 commission tiers. There was a curated commission, which was taking very established photographers for large commissions, photographers, some of my favorite photographers like Christina de Midel and Hannah Whitaker. Great to see. And I've been a huge advocate of bringing women into the space as well, especially in photography, because just photography generally is a male-dominated space. But I think in NFT, it takes more of that time. Mona Kuhn, who helped curate this billboard exhibition, was involved there. So Obscura had started with 3 tiers of commissions. There were the curated commissions, and then there were 5 of us that were in what we call the Foundry Commission. And that was giving us the opportunity to create work. And from that came 25 one-of-one NFTs. Which were sold out before we created them. But we actually, because Obscura was new and we like to look at it as sort of an educational platform, it really, we worked together, and we worked with a curator from the Houston Museum of Photography. So as we were creating, which was tough for a lot of us because we're all sort of mid-career artists, the commissioned artists just went off and did their projects. But the Foundry artists, we tried to touch base and work together, and a lot of us are not used to sharing anymore. So we're just like, I'm not showing you anything I'm doing until it's finished. It was really quite interesting to have to step back a little bit, and all of us get a little bit uncomfortable. So there was a mentoring aspect of that there between the curator and between Alejandro, having a look at what Gregory, Fernando, Claudia, and Joseph and I were doing. So that's the Foundry Commission. And that actually has gone on with a number of these Obscura commissions to show in Venice, which is incredible. Also another artist dream outside of the billboards. And then there was a third tier of commissions, which is called the Community Commissions, that included a number of photographers that were involved in the Obscura community. And we commissioned them, and we worked very closely with them, myself and another Obscura family member, Carlos, and one of the Magnum photographers, Jim Goldberg. So it was this incredible opportunity for younger photographers who were just coming into photography or just coming into the space, or had only been in for a few years to make work as well. So there's that whole education and community component of it that I think that we're all still really excited about, to see how Obscura evolves, because there are a lot of collecting platforms, but you know, kind of this Obscura University is really an interesting premise, I think, and it's just a cool group of people that are really amazing to work with, but know what they're doing.
And so me, what I really love about Obscura DAO, it's this way of the community that you can have from the public, but also from photographer, while helping each other to create a project in common, or to actually follow what the community wants, and to see between what the community wants and what the photographer wants, the project that can merge out of it. And this is something that is really fascinating. And my question is, did you find this kind of collaborative way in the traditional world of photography? I mean, at this stage, at this point, so you see, or
no, it was completely new and refreshing. I think, and that's why it was so exciting and sort of really pulls people in, is because it was an entirely sort of new way of working. And really, for all of us that did commissions, I think it really just kicked our asses a little bit. Like, okay, this is a different way of doing this. It's a different level of accountability. It's also, and Alejandro was very clear about this, working fast. And that's why he called them commissions and not grants. I mean, usually the art world just moves so slowly. So, you know, you get a grant, you apply, 6 months later, you get the grant, or you get notification, and then the work happens within a 1-year period, and then you find somewhere to exhibit it. Like I'm hopefully working on this 20-year anniversary of this volume work, an exhibition of it, but it will start touring in September of 2024. So, right. Yeah. And that's kind of fast on a museum timeline. So
yeah, what do you think will happen between these 2 years in the Web3? What do you think gonna happen?
Yeah. Well, actually, you say that, and it should be part of the conversation that I have with them. And it might be interesting to track how that goes, and make sure I get some billboards with the show too, because I do love the billboards. It's about the size that I've wanted the work to be always. I mean, I remember walking into my first gallery in New York, and I love my dealers. They had a gallery called Invisible Exports for 10 years. And I walked into the first gallery, and I walked in and just started crying, because I was like, but it's not big enough. and we made it work, but yeah. So this is the right size.
And you can actually import into metaverse even bigger, as big as you want.
Yeah. That's why I'm glad to see, you know, places like Super Chief getting warehouse spaces in LA and New York, and I was able to visit the Quantum space in LA when I was there, and it's nice to see the work outside of the screen. So, but for me, again, conceptually, scale has been really important. It's not just, I mean, everybody wants a billboard, right? Like, it's an amazing thing to be able to have. But for me, conceptually, in order to get the books to no longer be about books, but about culture, it often takes, you know, this. And Mona's placement, Mona Kuhn went around. There were, I'm not sure actually how many artists, there were 20 artists who had billboards, but she went around and actually considered which neighborhoods in LA were best for all the pieces of work. So, you know, there's pictures of her holding little printouts of all of our work to say, oh, I want this one here because it is in this neighborhood and has this this feeling. So this is actually a pretty, not the nicest part of LA that this is in, and I think it's a really, I love the placement of it. It's very, it's nice to see work in a public realm and not in a museum. So I've always really wanted to do that, and this has inspired me to get back to that public realm as well.
Definitely, and I have to say it's pretty mysterious. Like if you just see the billboard like this with blood on something that appears to be book, but who knows? You don't know because it's a really close-up photograph, correct? And it's really interesting. And then obscura blood, you're like, what is this mysterious billboard? So you're just curious about it. So it's a really, it's really nice also to just bring finally the digital. It was for real digital to real, and I just think it's a circle that just should blend. Like the physical world and the digital world shouldn't be opposites; they just should blend. Because you're never gonna have the same experience on digital and on reality. But why can you just blend and take the best out of it on both? It's just bonus.
Yeah, and I think like you're saying, the reality is you're on my website looking at work now. It's just flipping it. That's how our work lives on all the time anyway, especially when you make installation work. It is consumed online. There's just no other, that's how we do it. So that's it.
No, it's really fascinating. I love all the black and just those books that, it's just crazy to think that you didn't touch the books. It's looked like it's staged, So the process of research, of creation, and also it looked like it was taken in the same library, all of them, because you have this kind of, photography, like class photography, when you have the same back, even the same. I know it must be a lot of work of post-production to have this dark fonts and this bright color, but I think, as you say, it's a research, part must be the most important part of your work, definitely.
Yeah, and actually there is hardly any post-production because I blacken out the tops sometimes, but sometimes because they're long exposures, they automatically go black in the top anyway. But they are all, the librarians have done all the work and the colors are already there. There's a big installation that I had done called Vogue, which I kept running into Vogue. The first time I photographed it, it was I think it's under, if you go to collocations on the bottom there. So and if you scroll down to Vogue, one of the first things I saw with Vogue was that it was bound in gray, which was crazy, but there it is. But then I found it bound in blue and purple and green and yellow and just like
rainbow.
Yeah. So just I find that fascinating that it's a lot about our perceptions of what these things are, and what they are culturally for us. So I went somewhere else with that question, but I don't do anything to them. I don't light them. I don't touch them. I'm kind of a technical ninny, which is why I need help when it comes to NFT and technology. I know what I want to say, but I sometimes need help saying it. But so I basically go in with my 35 millimeter and the work has been done for me.
No, don't say that. Otherwise, everyone will do the same. Okay, the articles, the products, the books are here, but your vision, your way of photographing and the message you transmit to it, it's creating. It's just...
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting because I've been working for a long time, and I just have recently, through working with hospice here in New Zealand, they always say when you have an experience with hospice, tell us your story. And someone was saying, that grief is like a fingerprint, and that fingerprint tells your story, and how important it is when people are dying. I lost my husband at 47. That's to carry on his story. That's what you've got. And I think sometimes as artists, at least I do, sometimes you think, oh, I'm doing this work that is, why am I doing this work? What is it? Well, you're creating a story, and I think the difference that we have as artists is that we're telling a larger story. So we have our individual stories that we want to tell, and then we have larger stories that we want to tell about our culture, about the world, about how we see the world, about how everyone sees the world. It's just as as writers do it in books, we as visual artists have stories to tell as well. And that has been a really interesting thing for me to think about lately. I had a critic say once, well, somebody get this woman out of the library. And they said that, I don't know, 10 years ago. And I think it'll be really interesting if I stay in for another 20, because it's going to be an entirely different landscape. It already is.
Totally different. So
Yeah.
now it's pretty exciting to see what's gonna be the future of books, of library. And Mikey, I just have one last question for you. So now, as a photographer, part of this new world, what best advice could you give to a photographer who is interested, but who don't know how to start? What would be your best advice to him?
Oh, probably to work from the heart. I think that photographers now have a different challenge in that they have so many, there's so much imagery out there, and there's so many styles that are defined, and everyone is a photographer, and everyone has their, I love my iPhone. It's a great camera. So I think you have to, I think as artists, you have to speak from the heart. And I think as photographers, I think it's really exciting. When I was in school, we limited ourselves very much to photography and traditional photography. And I think now photographers coming out of school, they work across so many disciplines. And I'm finally realizing, after doing this for decades, that I'm allowed to, be a photographer, be a writer, be an installation artist, be a sculptor, be a jeweler, whatever it is. It doesn't make any difference. So just don't, I would say, just go with your heart, and because that's your story.
It's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful, and I think it's a pretty good advice. So can we have, like, I don't know, a little inch on your next project, or on what you are working, maybe for NFTs or?
Yes. Well,
Really? Is on the corner. Well, waiting.
for NFTs, I'm trying to yeah, I think what I'm interested in, I'll just say, is classification, which sounds really boring, but I've always been interested. What I've been playing with a little bit is how to classify NFTs. In the library, you have the Dewey Decimal System, or you have a library system that gives you sort of numbers of classification of how it works, and everything in the information universe gets classified. So I'm interested in figuring out a classification system for NFTs and visual work.
You know what? Classification sounds boring, but when you explain it, it sounds sexy.
I'll try to make it sexy.
Go for it. Definitely.
Easy.
Mikey, thank you so much for your time. It was a really, really interesting conversation with you. And it was fascinating to know more about your work, your process of creation, and why the library and why the books. And it just gave even more, envy to just go to a library and not just go past the book, but try to find like similarity in the book. If I found some, I will send you a picture from my
Good.
iPhone.
I love it. I've got a collection of those that people send me, so I'd love it. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to Jenny Dow for collecting the work. It really means a lot.
Lovely day, Mikey.
Thank
See
you. Bye.